Hello, everybody, and welcome to Comically Incompetent. My name is Doug, and this week we're doing things a little bit differently. We are back in person with returning guest, our Ant-Man expert. Dad, how you doing?
Good.
So, as you can probably tell from the outfit and from our background, we're going to be doing Indiana Jones and the
Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I was going to
Actually, the name of the movie started out as Raiders of the Lost Ark. They changed it years later to be Indiana Jones Raiders of the Lost Ark.
To make it more of a franchise feel.
Yes.
They did the same thing with Star Wars. Star Wars A New Hope was just called Star Wars, and then when they got greenlit to make more, they changed it and added the title A New Hope. So.
And I wanted to be the first guest host.
Yes.
To come in character.
Fully dressed up.
Fully dressed, because I am excited to be doing Indiana Jones.
It's going to be good. I also need to point out to the viewers that he's got the full outfit down to the shoes as well that you cannot see. So I'm excited to get into this one. It's a great movie. It's one that I've known for a long time. But first, real quick, the beer for this week is called Cobra Pants because of our hero's fear of snakes. So we'll get more into that at the end of the show. But just to jump right into the movie.
But also tell the audience too. There is another beer that you found.
Well, actually, my sister found it.
Your sister found it, but we couldn't get it in time to bring it to the show, so officially we couldn't use it, but it was called
Dark of the Covenant.
Dark of the Covenant.
Which is the perfect name for a beer, and I wasn't going to drive to Pasadena. It's like so far away for us, but it is the perfect beer, so shout out to Danny. Thanks for pointing that out to me, but we are going to go with Cobra Pants this week, which is from Noble Ale Works, which we've actually done before. The viewers have seen before on Shrek 3. So
it's really good.
It's really good. We'll get more on that at the end of the show. But I want to ask you something. So talking about this movie, I did the math. You were 15 when this movie came out. Did you see this movie in theaters?
I did.
What was that?
Everybody saw this movie in theaters.
Yeah.
I think it cost about $12 million to make the movie.
Yeah.
And it made $18 million in the first weekend, and this is years ago. What was it, 1981?
I mean, for inflation, it's about the same as like an Avengers movie nowadays.
Right,
basically.
and I think worldwide it's made $330 million or something. So yeah, they made back all their money in one weekend, and I do remember seeing this in the theater, although I don't remember it in detail because it was so long ago.
Yeah,
but I do remember seeing it in theaters.
Yeah, I mean,
this is one of the greatest movies of all time. Right?
Yeah, and this is one of the first, I think, like not the first, but toward the beginning of like the summer blockbuster. It's like right at the kind of beginning of like what that phase of like what was going to become a summer blockbuster started out. Right.
And Harrison Ford, he's been in a few good movies, right?
One or two.
Some money. Yeah, good.
I mean, he wasn't that... I mean, he had Star Wars under his belt, and I think maybe one more role when he got this one. Because I actually read somewhere, you probably saw it too, Tom Selleck was the first choice.
Okay.
For Indiana Jones. And then he had a scheduling conflict, which usually in Hollywood is the nice way of saying it wasn't going to work out.
Bummer for him.
Yeah, someone didn't like someone else. So he didn't do it, so they got Harrison Ford because they were like, oh, we did Star Wars with this guy, let's bring him on.
Right.
And I mean, perfect casting. I mean, I think the best way of showing it is that opening scene. One of the greatest opening scenes in film history, which shows probably one of the most handsome men of the 1980s acting-wise. Harrison Ford, that was like a phenomenal opening scene.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the movie starting, it's probably one of the greatest opening starts. And then the movie from the beginning all the way to the end was just nonstop action, right? The whole time. I know we're going to talk about some of the other... when we get into episode 2 and 3 and 4, but number 1 was by far one of the greatest beginnings of a movie, and really just grabbed you in and never let you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of those movies that I don't remember the first time I saw it. I think you probably showed it to me when I was young, because I don't remember the first time, but I remember the movie so well. I've seen it a million times now. And that first scene, you have they're creeping through the forest, you kind of know something's going on, who's this guy that they're following and putting all this faith in, and then they kind of start to turn at each other. They have the one guy who then pulls the gun on Indy, and he turns around and does the whip for the first time, it cracks.
Right. Which, by the way, I couldn't find a whip to go with my outfit. I wanted a whip, and your mom wouldn't let me have one, so...
That makes sense. Yeah. That might turn out not well. But, I mean, you got the rest of the outfit, so you're good.
That's right. And also...
Yes, I forgot we got to do that.
We have to show everybody... We do have the signed, there's a big glare here, but the signed Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones photograph. I do have this in my office.
And it goes along with the signed poster of Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
That's right, which we will talk about regrettably. But let's get back to one of the greatest movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
So, also want to talk about this opening scene. We have another actor who I don't know if he was major big at the time.
No, I think this was one of his first movies.
Yeah,
Alfred Molina.
Yeah. He wasn't that young. He got a later start into the industry, I think.
Well, Alfred Molina, and I think you and I have had this conversation before. Alfred Molina can play any nationality known to man.
Yeah.
Right? He has been in movies where he has played Hispanic characters. He's played Middle Eastern characters. Yeah. He's actually, I believe, Cuban by descent. But he has played a number of different characters of different ethnicities, and he's pulled them all off. And I think he was also a villain in some of the Marvel movies, wasn't he?
He was Dr. Octopus in Spider-Man 2 with Tobey Maguire.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to get to those eventually. But, yeah, that was it. Because he was pretty young at that point in the movie as well. And he was an interesting character because I remember as a kid watching this. And there's that scene where they're leaving the temple. And Indy turns and he's gone like through that like spikes.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I talk about like the practical effects they did in this movie. It looked phenomenal. And just real quick, I want to say, talk about the opening scene, how amazing it was. The fact that this movie has a ride in Disneyland and the whole entire ride is based off the first 11 minutes of this movie is insane to me.
I mean, if you think about it, right, it has its own ride in Disneyland.
Yeah.
Right? It's iconic. I mean, everybody knows who it is. When you play that music, dun, 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 right? Everybody knows what that is. Grown men dress up like him. It's an iconic movie of all time, starting with those first scenes where it just grabs you and never lets you go. And it's funny, in this movie, too, there's actually, if you think about it, and you look at it, there's very few actors. But the effects at the time were fantastic. They still are today. And the concept, at least in this first Raiders of the Lost Ark, first Indiana Jones movie, Raiders of the Lost Ark, was, believable of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And how they played it all off. So the storyline was fantastic as well.
Yeah, bringing I think one thing that gets lost is that this is also a period piece. It takes place in the 1930s.
Yep, late 30s. But there were some pretty talented people associated with the movie, right? George Lucas, Steven Spielberg, John Williams did the music. Yeah. I mean, if you counted up all the Academy Awards and everything the people that worked on this movie had, it's enormous.
I mean, because I think when you have Star Wars, which was just such a massive hit, and you have George Lucas, who then says, I want to bring Steven Spielberg on to direct a movie that they both worked together to make it. And then you get John Williams, and there's no way this isn't going to work. There's no way this movie was going to fail, really.
Right.
I mean, you have an adventure story that, like you said, just keeps going. There's action. There's some romance. There's great acting on everyone's part. I mean, Karen Allen playing
Ravenwood's daughter,
Yeah, Marion Ravenwood. Yeah. And John Rhys Davies playing Sala, who is always fantastic. I mean, Lord of the Rings actor.
Was he in Lord of the Rings? Okay.
He plays Gimli the Dwarf in Lord of the Rings.
And then, what's the name of the actor that plays the Indiana Jones sort of, not sidekick, but his partner in crime, the curator?
I don't know his real name. Marcus Brody is his name in the film.
Yeah, Dabney. Was it? No, what was his name? But anyways, he's a great actor as well, in a number of great movies, and played a great part in this whole. I was going to say trilogy because I just forget about the fourth one, but in these 4 movies.
Yeah, the cast was fantastic, and I just like the character building. They built Indiana Jones as a character in a way that you can relate to him, because I know that they were thinking about making him like this kind of womanizer, but they end up writing that kind of thing out because they wanted the audience to kind of feel a lot more for this character and like who he is more. Because then you get into this part after you have that opening scene with the famous boulder, and I think everyone knows that scene. Then you
it is right there behind us.
Then I like that they change gears completely and move into now he's a professor. Now he's teaching the class, and all the students are in love with him.
But the way they make that. I mean, we're jumping scenes here, but when he's the professor, all the girls love him, right?
Yes.
And they go through this great scene in the classroom at one point where the girls are all oohing over him. He's trying to teach, and then one of the young ladies is blinking her eyes, and it says "Love you" on her eyelids. It's all funny how they sort of brought in that whole professorship piece of it. But then there's this spy angle to it where he's actually working for the government to go find the Ark of the Covenant based on history and books and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I know this was one of those movies that affected society so much. I think there's like a spike in archaeology students at one point after the movie came out because everyone's like, "That's so cool! I want to be an archaeologist. That's what archaeology is." And
right,
they're like, "No,
that's not what archaeology is."
Yeah, you're moving a little bit. You're kind of
Okay.
So, but yeah, I mean, we also meet the kind of villain of this movie, Belloc. After he escapes from the temple, he's got the artifact. And Belloc says the line is like, "There's nothing which you could possess which I cannot take away."
Right.
And I like that scene because it kind of introduces this villain of this guy who is another archaeologist.
He is.
But
well, is he a villain? I mean, or is he's a competitor, right? He's a competitor.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess he's a villain because he does try to finish off Indiana Jones a number of times.
He's working with the Nazis,
and
too.
he's working with the Nazis, but he is... he is his arch enemy, his competitor, right? Yeah. But if we look at the movie as it builds, right? You have that first scene where he goes in to get this, gold skull of some sort, and he goes through this whole maze and how to do it, and then he escapes, and that's with the boulder trying to crush him, and this whole maze of some sort of Aztec ruins or something that he's in. Which just sets the tone of what the whole rest of the movie is going to be like. And then he flies to Nepal to go find his former girlfriend, who's the daughter of his mentor, to find an artifact that will help him locate the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yeah, it's the, what's it called?
Staff of Ra.
Staff of Ra.
The Staff of Ra.
Yeah, and he's going for like the headpiece that goes on top of the staff. And I mean, Karen Allen was fantastic. I mean, she was probably one of the only redeeming things watching the fourth one of like they brought her back in.
Yep.
Because as far as his like,
and they never did that in any other. It was always a different love interest in the first three movies, and then she comes back in the fourth.
Yeah, which we'll get into next week of why Kate Capshaw was the love interest in that one.
Well, that's not why she was the love interest. She became the love interest because she was on that movie, and that's where she met Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Karen Allen was great in this, and I like that we get introduced to our Nazi villain of that weird guy who's like breathes.
Yeah, who is that guy?
I've never seen him in anything else before. I feel like
he was creepy.
He was, and he did a good job of being like the creep. He was very breathy and like breathing like this and talking like, what's that character that like? There's like a cartoon character or something like that. I can't remember who now, but yeah, he comes in because they're also looking for the staff because they have the same information, right? We have that scene beforehand where Indy and Marcus Brody are talking to the two, like what, CIA or FBI guys.
Yep.
And they're trying to figure out like what
they
this
intercepted a Nazi communication.
Yeah.
Talking about Tanis, and what they were doing is getting closer to the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
So the whole movie is a race to who gets there first, right?
Yeah.
Or at least the first half of the movie is a race to who gets there first, and then it's a race to, who ends up with the Ark of the Covenant, right?
Yeah, because I like that Indiana Jones as a character. They made his whole thing that he's not there for the money. He's there to make sure that these artifacts get into museums so people can learn about them.
Yes.
I like that angle that they did.
Yeah, he's a true Robin Hood type character.
They really pushed that point about him that he's not there for the Ark to make money. He's there to learn about it, study it, and then put it in a museum for people to learn about it as well. And I like that kind of dynamic they put in there. And that was the whole thing because that's what makes Belloc his antithesis. Is that he's there for the money.
Denholm Elliott is Marcus Brody's.
Okay.
That's the name of the actor. I just can't.
That just hit you out of nowhere.
The satellite came around and it landed, and I got it. Okay. Yes. So nonstop action. The next set of great scenes then becomes there's a lot of fight scenes in the whole movie, right? There's the fight scene in the bar in Nepal, and the Ravenwood, Marion gets, they get out, and then they fly to Egypt.
Yes.
Where they're going to go find this lost city of Tanis.
Yeah, which I think funny behind the scenes stuff is that when they were shooting over there in, it was Egypt, right?
Well, it was supposed to be Egypt, but I believe it was actually Tunisia.
Yeah. Everyone on set got sick from the food except for Steven Spielberg, and he says that because he didn't trust the food, he only ate SpaghettiOs.
Whatever he brought
from home.
Whatever he brought, yeah.
So everyone got
move.
sick. Yeah, which because there's that famous scene that everyone loves of, right? Indy's trying to find Marion. She's being taken, and he turns the corner, and there's that guy who does all these sword tricks. You think there's going to be a big fight, because they're originally in the script, there was supposed to be a big fight. But I think Harrison Ford, like, dysentery, so to kind of work around it, they just had him pull out the gun, shoot him, and then turn around. I thought that was a great way to cover it, and it made it probably a better scene, a more famous scene than it would have been.
Very famous scene, and the whole that whole sort of how it played out, and the fight scenes, and then they shoots the guy. I mean, it was all just kind of kept you going. So they would go from these chunks of these adventure scenes, right?
Yeah.
And then they'd move on to the next one.
And it was kind of piecing it together. So Indy meets with John Rhys Davies' character Sala to then see if he can decode what's on the headpiece of the Staff of Ra, which then he can, and he has more information because he's been recruited to work for the Nazis, but he's really working for Indy. Well, they recruited everybody.
Yeah,
Cairo. It's in Cairo.
In Cairo, Egypt. He runs a company that does excavation and digging. So the Nazis hired his company to do excavation and digging. They needed to read what the headpiece said to tell them how tall to make the headpiece. So when they place the headpiece in the hole and the sun hits it, it shows them the right place to find the where the Ark of the Covenant is
supposedly going to be. Yeah,
and that's when the snakes come in.
Yeah, because a lot of this movie takes place in Cairo looking for Tanis.
Yes.
But we did skip a bit. So Marion gets captured. I like that part.
Oh, she gets captured like 10 times.
Yeah, she does. But I like the scene where he finds her, and he's like, all right, I'll come back for you, and then puts the gag back in her mouth.
Yes.
And then runs away, because he's like, if they find out that you're gone, this isn't going to work. So then he leaves, and she has to kind of fend for herself now, because she's trying to get away as well. But I liked that dynamic of, they made her an interesting character. Yeah, she gets captured every 10 seconds. But they made her like that kind of strong, back-talking kind of character, too.
They did, and they had her, it was funny, they kept dressing her up in like these evening gowns, and she's running around in Egypt in these evening gowns. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, I mean, what Harrison Ford did was run around dressed like this, which is good for outside. She was dressed in a dress and heels, and she had to do all the same running that he did.
Well, Harrison Ford is like any other superhero character. He has his uniform, and that's what he wears.
Yeah, because we see him when he's the professor, he's dressed really nice and super. Well, you know he's going to get rid. Like, there's going to be adventure when he's dressed like this.
That's right.
Yeah, so then he finds the staff, and they get in, they find where it's going to be. He finds the real location of Tanis, because the Nazis only had the one side. So they were digging in the wrong place the whole time. Right.
They were digging in the wrong place, and this is, a little bit of, remember the movie Holes?
Yeah.
I mean, they're just digging in the Sahara Desert to try and find this lost city of Tanis. They're not really sure where they're going, so...
Yeah, and Belloc is so certain. He says that scene where he's talking to the Nazis, and he's like, my calculations are never wrong. Like, we're digging in the right place. We just need to find it. And they were digging, like, not even a mile, like, a few yards away from the actual spot where they find it. And so then there's a scene where snakes, right? So Indy falls in. He goes in with Sala.
Yeah, he goes into this, I don't know what it is, if it's a tomb or some sort of
it's not like
underground room of some sort.
That the Egyptians built, because there's like the Ra statues in there, or not Ra, like what are those called? The dogs with the...
I don't know.
Egyptian thing. Yeah, so he's in there, and him and Sala go in, and they get the Ark. They find the Ark in there.
Well, first they got to get past all the snakes.
Yeah, which they use gasoline.
They use gasoline and fire to get the snakes out of the way. And that's sort of an ongoing theme of all the Indiana Jones movies. Snakes, spiders...
Rats in the third one.
Yeah, whatever you can get that will make you feel uncomfortable and squirm in your seat.
Yeah, and there's that line that he has where he's like, snakes. Why does it have to be snakes?
And then I think when we get to 3, right, one of the great things about the third movie, which I think is one of the best, between 1 and 3, they're the two best. 3, they explain a bunch of things from the other movies. And we'll talk about those when we get to episode 3. But yes.
And so then they find the Ark, and they send it up, but then right as they're getting the Ark out, that's when Belloc notices.
And he finds them.
So he goes and gets Sala out, throws Marion into the snake pit with Indy, and then shuts him in.
Covers him up.
Yeah.
So now they have to navigate their way through this... tomb or whatever, crypt or whatever that is down underneath the ground and figure out how to get out of there.
Yeah, so I like that, because then the tension rises because they're running out of the gasoline. They have no fire anymore, so now they're just standing in the circle of snakes with fire going out. Indy's knocking down statues, breaking open doors. or break open walls, and which is funny. I think it's funny that that tomb was like they couldn't find it; it was so hidden. But the exit to the tomb was just right around the corner, and they're all set up right on the outside of the tomb.
Well, you gotta. I mean, they had to go through all this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, there was stuff blocking the way, but I feel like they were right there. Like they should have known. Like
there's always what I find funny is there's always some sort of secret way. Like you lean on something, and all of a sudden the wall opens up, right? Or
very like young Frankenstein.
Yes.
Put the candle back.
That's right. So so they find their way out. And so now it becomes a battle of the second third of the movie becomes a battle of the Nazis are trying to take the Covenant back to Germany to present it to Hitler, and they're trying to figure out how to get it back. And Indiana Jones keeps upsetting the their ability to do so. Right?
Yeah.
They were going to fly it, and he blows up the plane. Right?
But that's a great scene. I love that scene because that's when him and Marion kind of sneak on. They have the plane. And he goes, and then he has to fight that big dude. Which was he like a football player or something?
I don't know who that guy is.
That dude is a beast. He was like 6'7" and just like 350 pounds. And that was a great. I also think
he was no match for the propeller blades. So.
Well, yeah, and who is? That was a really intense scene of like them.
But that's
fighting.
an ongoing theme of all the Indiana Jones movies. Is he always has to fight some big guy?
Yeah.
And he finds an interesting way to beat him. Like the big guy with the sword earlier in this movie, he just shoots him, right? This guy gets stuck in the propeller. Every movie he fights some guy 3 times his size and he figures out a way to win.
He's out strength, but then he always outwits.
Yes.
Which I like about his character, and it's a character that he needs smarts. Like he's strong, but it's more like how can he think his way out of the situation, which is not something that I think we really had in the 80s as a character. Usually it was like the big strong lead that was going to be like, outstrength and save the woman, and like fly out of there. Like that was kind of what we had for a while. So he was kind of early on the like smart guy who's going to think his way out of these situations.
So is Indiana Jones considered a superhero?
I would not. You could make an argument, I'm sure. Probably not, but I'm sure you could find an argument there. Yes, and they have to drive it out now. Now comes they have a chase
whole
scene.
Nother set of
a whole nother chase scene on the car where Indy's jumping from car to car and he's throwing people off the hood of the car.
Well, they're not car. I mean, they're like military transport vehicles, right? Yeah. And Indiana Jones does have a propensity to take on large amounts of people by himself.
Yeah. Which, again, it kind of more outsmarting, but like, there's a lot of strength. He punches the guy and throws him out of the hood of the car.
Right.
And he's swerving the car, and it's just...
But there is a great scene where Indiana Jones gets thrown on the front, and then this military transport truck, and then he grabs onto the grill, and then he holds on underneath as he goes underneath the truck while it's going.
Yeah.
50 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, wherever it's going, and he's holding on to it. It's a great, what do you want to call it, stuntman type scene where somebody rode underneath this truck. I'm sure they had him on some sort of board or something, right?
Yeah.
And the truck, as the truck's rolling, he's climbing underneath the truck and out to the backside of the truck.
Yeah. No, it was awesome.
Great scene.
And John Williams' score, obviously, just adds to it and makes it even more cool and makes it more intense, and I like that about it. And this movie, though, it's 2 hours long, but like you said, a lot of it's fighting scenes or chasing scenes, so it doesn't feel that long because you're kind of immersed in these big, giant budget scenes that they keep throwing you into left and right. There's not a whole lot of, like, sit down and think it out like there is in... Like the third one, the scene in the chapel where they're trying to find where X marks the spot. Like there's not scenes like that as much in this one. It's a lot more of like big fight scenes.
Yep, and it just keeps going. I mean, it just keeps going. So they transport the Covenant, the Ark of the Covenant, and Indiana Jones isn't able to get it away from him. He gets it and then they get it back. So
he gets it and then he takes it onto a ship, which is run by like pirates.
Yep.
And they get on the ship, but then the German submarine comes and takes it back.
Yeah, they always seem to get ahead of him and then get it back. But eventually they take it up to it's some island or something, and they take it there, and there's going to be some ritual where they're going to Belloc wants to open it up and make sure it's what it's supposed to be before he takes it to Hitler and embarrasses himself.
Which I think that was actually a ruse. I think he was only telling that because I think, as an archaeologist, he wanted to open it for himself before. Because if Hitler got a hold of it, he wasn't going to let Belloc open it. So I think he wanted to take that chance to open it and see what was inside and see, like, really experience it and study it before it went to Hitler.
You think that, or it just made a better movie if they had the whole scene where they were opening it?
I mean, I think obviously that, but as far as like when you're looking at the story, like I think that's what the reason was for that.
And this is where the whole movie then begins to bring in some sort of ancient religious beliefs and things like that as well, right? Because now they open this, and I think Indiana Jones and Marion are tied up. They've been captured. They're tied up, and when the Belloc and the Nazis open the Covenant, right? All this
like the spirits or
evil comes out of the Covenant, which they call the power of God, right? So it sort of gets a little biblical here, right? Because if you've ever read any of the Bible, right, there's a lot of biblical things that happen where they the power of God comes down on people, right? The wrath of God, if you've heard of that before. So it's sort of that kind of concept of the wrath of God, and basically wipes out everybody. And this is where it gets a little corny, right?
Yeah.
As long as Indiana Jones and Marion don't open their eyes, they're perfectly
fine.
safe.
They're safe, yeah. Except I want to know, so back in, this was I think 81.
81.
I mean, the technology they use, they have it make it look like the Nazis' faces are, like, melting off
them. That is a great scene, yeah.
Was that, like, I mean, I'm assuming that had to be, like, terrifying, because that looked really good now. I couldn't imagine back in the 80s when, like, that was insanely new technology.
It's kind of weird. I mean, if you think about it, if you look at the movie holistically, a lot of people die. Yeah. There's a lot of...
It's very dark.
I mean, they scale back the blood, per se, but there is blood. A lot of people die. The melting faces are a great scene. But it wasn't like gore and horrible because it was this adventure movie, right?
Yeah, well, they almost, I guess the MPAA, that's the people who rate movies for really like PG to R, wanted to make it R because of that last scene where the faces melt off. But then they scaled back the blood a little bit and made it a very quick scene.
Right.
It's like the face melts and they move on. Like they got a PG-13 rating for it.
Well, yeah, the face melted, but it was like it went from a face to like a skeletal thing pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I don't know, for some reason they were able to make it so it wasn't like some horrible gory thing. It was like not real, but yet it was a great effect. I mean, I'm assuming it was some sort of wax figure or something, and how
then they just sped it up.
Yeah,
like probably fast forwarded the film to make it look a lot faster. But that was a cool. They opened the arc. I'm curious if in the storyline, like obviously it's not in the movie, but I'm curious if the Nazis, if it had been like a good people who had opened it, would that have happened to them as well? Like, could Indy have opened it alone and it would have...
I don't know. There was a telling scene at one point where the Ark is in this box, this crate, this wood crate, that the Nazis had stamped with a swastika.
Yeah.
And at one point, the Ark itself just like burned off the Nazi markings on the outside of the crate. Why did it do that?
Yeah. They never go into that, but it's very quick. Like, you see it kind of burn out, and then... Well, you see it burning. You think it's going to burn the box, then they go in to get the crate, and only the swastika's been burned off. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I'm curious if maybe if Indy had opened it alone, maybe that wouldn't have happened? Or how that would have gone.
We'll never know.
We'll never know, because then they take the Ark and they put it in this warehouse, and it's studied by top men.
Top men, right.
By top men.
But basically, the end scene, and are we ending too early here? But the end scene,
can keep talking about it.
The end scene is the U.S. government now has hold of the Ark of the Covenant after all is said and done, and the end scene is, as you said, the CIA or the FBI, whatever those guys are telling him, because Indiana Jones wants it in a museum.
Yeah.
They said, no, we're taking it. It's being studied by our top men, our top people, and then the last scene is. They're rolling it into some giant government warehouse and sticking it in this warehouse with, the warehouse
whatever else.
As far as you could see in either direction of boxes of stuff that you don't even know what's in there.
Yeah.
Basically what they said is they just buried it in there, never to be found again, right?
Which, I mean, that was a great scene and a good kind of like... Because then the music starts to roll and the credits start to roll, but... It was interesting that they had done that because I think maybe the government didn't want it to be discovered, didn't want it to be known, maybe, is the kind of whole thing that they're trying to go into.
Remember, the whole idea of this and why the Nazis wanted it is supposedly if you had this, the power of it could lead armies to
Yeah.
victory, right?
So you think the U.S. government would open that thing up, but
That would be evil then.
it would be evil.
But I don't know, hiding it in a warehouse for never to be used again, what does that mean? I thought the second movie then would play upon that, right?
Went a completely different direction.
Went a completely different direction. Never even mentioned it again.
Yeah.
We never hear in any of the other movies anything about the Ark of the Covenant.
Except for Crystal Skull. We see the Ark for a second. It's a little, like, fan service teaser.
I blocked that out of my brain.
You're going to have to watch it because we're going to go into
I'll
it.
watch it again.
I don't want to either. I don't want it any more than you do. It reminds me a lot of when Tom Grace and I had to watch Shrek 4. None of us wanted to do that. But we hunkered
It's
down.
Shrek. Why would you not want to do that?
You'll listen to the episode.
I did.
But, I mean, as far as Indiana Jones, this movie goes, this was groundbreaking. I mean, this set the tone for every action-adventure movie out there from here on out. I mean, everything kind of takes from Indiana Jones a little bit, somewhere here and there.
Right. So I was thinking, right, so it's got its own ride at Disneyland. How many movies, because I started thinking about this, how many movies, well, there's two things. How many movies have their own ride? And this could go two ways. The movie became a ride, or the ride became a movie.
Yeah.
Right? So Indiana Jones, right, that's one. Pirates of the Caribbean, the ride became the movie.
Yeah.
Haunted Mansion, the ride became the movie. At Universal Studios up in LA, you have The Mummy is a ride.
Yeah.
That's a great ride.
I think the Indiana Jones movie is the only movie that was a movie and then the ride came based off the movie. Everything else had movies based off of the... Oh, actually, no, The Mummy, I guess.
Well, okay, at Magic Mountain, isn't there a ride called Superman?
Yeah, that's true. But they...
And Batman?
The ride is
so
based
those
off
were
of
movies
characters.
that became rides, although they're roller coasters, but still.
They're named after these characters.
They're named after these characters.
But the Indiana Jones one is interesting to me because, like, the Mummy one was, like, had some... You and I went on together. There was, like, bits of the Mummy here and there, stories, but it was mostly a roller coaster. Indiana Jones is one of the only ones I can think of that you literally drive through the first 12 minutes of the Indiana Jones movie.
I mean, in typical Disney fashion, they've sort of built the sets of the movie, whereas the Mummy... I think it's been a long time since I've been on that, but The Mummy there were screens and they were showing sort of clips and stuff from the movie, but it's not like in Indiana Jones Ride at Disney, they've built the whole boulder thing coming down, right?
Which is a great scene. And I don't know when the last time you were on it was, but they actually have the animatronic of Harrison Ford in the ride now.
Oh, I don't know if I've seen that. It's been a long time.
Yeah, so in the beginning, when you kind of, I don't know if you remember, you kind of turn into the temple, and then Harrison Ford animatronic is there talking to you, just like they added the Johnny Depp into Pirates of the Caribbean. And at the end of the ride, once you kind of go underneath when the boulder comes, then there's Indy standing there being like, "Good job, adventurers," or whatever he says. It's super cheesy, but they added him in there.
Okay.
But, yeah, I mean, because this movie was so insane. Like, they made a franchise out of it. 3 other movies with another one on the way.
Yep.
There's one more announced for sure, and they said they're going to continue the series with another actor taking the mantle of Indiana Jones.
I'm not sure I'm probably
not going to watch those as well.
I'm not sure I'm going to enjoy that, but we'll see.
I think the mistake...
We'll give it a shot.
Yeah. Well, I think the mistake they're making is people didn't like... people liked Harrison Ford, not...
It made an enormous amount of money.
Yeah.
So, you got to keep trying, right?
Well, they also actually have announced fully... I was going to say this as well. A full video game based on Indiana Jones that's going to come out. A full open-world adventure...
Really?
Video game coming out that they just announced that's going to be Indiana Jones themed.
So does Disney own, is that why they have the ride? They own the Indiana Jones franchise now from George Lucas? Or?
Well, they didn't until they think they bought Star Wars. I think that means they acquired Lucasfilms.
Okay, and they bought all of that?
Which then, in that acquisition, Indiana Jones was probably a part of.
So Disney and Lucas were already doing collaborations before that even happened.
Well, I mean, because before Disney bought Star Wars, Star Tours was a ride at Disneyland.
Yes.
But that was before the acquisition.
But Star Tours isn't Star Wars.
Yeah, it is.
Is it?
Yeah.
No, I don't know. I don't like that ride. It makes me sick.
Yeah, and me too. But now they have the whole Star Wars land at Disneyland with all the rides and stuff, but...
They used to have the Michael Jackson thing. Did they get rid of that?
That's been gone for a long time.
Because Michael Jackson and Disney, probably not a good thing.
I mean, yeah. And that was like a 90s thing, or 80s thing.
I've seen the documentary on Michael Jackson and Neverland, and
I haven't seen it, and
I wouldn't mix kids and Michael Jackson after that.
No, I keep the vinyl up there, and I just pretend like nothing happened. But as far as this movie goes, I mean, this was...
By the way, we were talking about movies into rides.
Yeah.
So right next to the Indiana Jones ride in Disneyland is a thing called Tarzan's Treehouse.
Oh yeah,
Which
Tarzan.
originally was built as the Swiss Family Treehouse.
Which that's a movie.
Which was a movie that they made into a, well, not really a ride because you got to walk the whole thing up the stairs, but that was a movie in the 1950s or 60s, whenever Disneyland was built. That was an original Disneyland attraction that became a ride as well.
Yeah, which to an even further extent, right on the other side of it is Jungle Cruise, and they made a movie that hasn't come out yet because of COVID, based on the Jungle Cruise.
Oh, on the Jungle Cruise?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's got The Rock and Emily Blunt, and it's going to be a whole Jungle Cruise themed movie based on the ride.
Okay.
I don't think there's any IP that Disney has not either turned into a ride or turned the ride into a movie.
Right.
They're going to grab that money wherever they can.
Well, then they used it, like, the Davy Crockett canoes at Disney are named after Davy Crockett, which was a movie.
Yeah, which I think they made at some point.
They did?
Yeah, I mean...
long before Disneyland was ever built, so...
Yeah, and now, like, Tom Sawyer Island, but that's gone. It's not like... It's like this
right.
Pirate
So other
Island
theme
whatever,
parks have done the same kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, but I think this was one that really started that trend. I mean, that you took a movie that everyone loved with an opening scene that was so embedded in everyone's minds that you made a ride out of the first 12 minutes of the movie.
Correct.
And I mean, this movie inspired so much, and like I said, I mean, if you look back at any action adventure movie about this kind of thing, I mean,
it's one of the greatest.
Yeah, I mean, there's games called Uncharted, which is basically Indiana Jones but with a different guy, but it's the whole premise. He's an archaeologist, basically.
Right. It was a great story. I mean,
Harrison Ford played it perfectly. Steven Spielberg directed beautifully. John Williams made a score that is stuck in everybody's minds.
Well, I mean, if you could probably name that tune in just a couple of bars, right?
Yeah, I mean, I know you wanted to play it when you got here, but we'll get copyright stricken off YouTube, so we can't do it. But
it's in my head though right now. For those listening,
that's fine.
I can hear it in my head. Can you hear it as well?
That's fine. And I mean, even when you look back, like the sound effects. I mean, there's the scenes of whenever someone's getting punched on screen, they're getting the sound. The Foley artist just hit a pile of leather jackets with a baseball bat.
What did they? I didn't bother to look. What awards did that movie win? Raiders of the Lost Ark. Did it win?
If I remember correctly, they won 3 Academy Awards for this movie just in Raiders of the Lost Ark alone. And we are both trying. Yeah. So they won
4 Oscars. Let's see. So Oscar winner for Best Art Direction, Set Direction. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Best Sound.
Makes sense. They did a beautiful job.
Best Film Editing. And you would have to opine on whether that was... And Best Effects and Visual Effects. It was a nominee for Best Picture, though. And Best Director. So Steven Spielberg didn't win.
Yeah.
Best Cinematography and Best Original Score. It didn't win Best Original Score. What did win Best Original Score?
Yeah, what could have beaten
in 1981?
That score.
We'll have to look that up.
But... yeah, I mean, when you look at that, I mean, how amazing this movie was. I mean, as far as the editing goes, the best way I can equate how a movie wins an editing award is how it was paced. And this movie is paced beautifully. You're never bored.
Never bored.
But you're never overdone by the amount of action. It's so perfectly paced. They're always excited the whole time. But you're having fun the whole time, and you're interested the whole time. That's, I think, the best editing is that
you never loses you. It's enjoyable.
Yeah.
It's enjoyable. I mean, I guess you could be a critic and say there's lots of killing and death, but it's sort of overshadowed by just the story and the adventure and the whole bit.
I think it's a different time, too. I mean, when that movie would probably be teetering on R nowadays because the MPA views things a lot differently than they used to. But I mean, that movie was like a family film. People are getting their faces melted off, heads are exploding, but that was like a big summer blockbuster that families took their kids to go watch.
Right. I mean, the head exploding thing, actually, if you think about it, that was a big controversy at the time, right? At the end... when they open the Ark and Indiana Jones and Marion close their eyes and don't get affected at all, Belloc's head explodes. Yeah. And you're kind of cheering because the villain is gone, but in the same respect, his head kind of exploded. Now they didn't. I mean, they kind of downplayed it, meaning
There's no blood.
Yeah, it showed it exploded, and you went, "Oh, his head exploded," and it moved on to the next thing. But still, it was that was a controversy back. I do remember that back when it happened.
Yeah.
And then I remember back in 81 when this came out, I mean, there was Raiders of the Lost Ark action figures and there was, breakfast cereal and everything. I mean, it was huge at the time. As, big releases do.
Yeah. I mean, this was, like I was saying, I think probably one of the biggest, Lucasfilm was killing. I mean, they had Star Wars, which was one of the biggest franchises of all time.
Yeah, but
there, and Indiana Jones.
Was Star Wars big when it first came out,
yes.
or did it just continue to gain momentum as it went on and on?
If anything, the momentum's probably started to die out now, but they were... I mean, that movie blew up. That was the first sci-fi movie to hit big, ever. I mean, 1979, I think? 78, 79?
Right.
I mean, that was... every sci-fi from then on has been based off of Star Wars. Nothing before that.
So was Harrison Ford the king of these, what do you call them, series movies, Star Wars,
I think inadvertently,
Indiana Jones, right?
They kind of brought him in, and he started to control, and be a big part of these roles. Then he got movies later on. Then he kept his fame going by being in these other big movies. I mean, coming to mind, Air Force One was a big action movie that he was in. That was good.
Right. Well, he just became
he
sort
kept
of
going,
an
an action star,
big box, and I guess if you were to calculate box office dollars associated to actors, he's got to be up there in the tops, I'm sure. With the Star Wars, I was going to say trilogy, but now it's what, 6 movies?
There's
7?
nine
movies?
Nine main story movies,
and he's in all of them, right?
He's in 4 of them. 4 of them. 4.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, he's left his mark on cinema history. I mean, every sci-fi, every action, every adventure movie has all been based off of what Harrison Ford has done in his career early on. I mean, this movie is outstanding. One of my absolute favorites that I've seen. I remember at the beginning of the pandemic, sitting with my girlfriend and I, we're going to watch all these. We didn't watch Crystal Skull. We're going to watch the original trilogy. And
that one doesn't count, and we'll explain that when we get to episode 4.
I don't even know if we should do a full episode.
Well, look, I'm going to take episode 4, and I'm going to look at it and give it a fair shake, new fair shake. I still don't know how space aliens and Indiana Jones go together, but I'm going to buy in, and we're going to see what happens.
See, it's not the aliens for me. It's Shia LaBeouf swinging from the trees with monkeys. That is where I fall off. That was when you and I saw it together, and I think that was when you leaned over to me and you said, "Do you think we could leave now?"
The expectation was so great because 1 was fantastic, 2 was very good, 3 was outstanding, and then we had 4. But we're going to talk about that. And I know you guys just went through this with the Shrek series, and, Shrek 4 was a great episode of Comically Incompetent, so I'm sure we're going to make...
We tried our best.
Number 4. We might for 4, we might have to have a couple of beers just in case.
I got a few. The beer for that one is interesting, to say the least. But I think that wraps up our Indiana Jones talk. You mind if I jump into the beer real quick?
Please.
So our beer this week is from Noble Ale Works. It's a brewery that we have done before. They are a fantastic brewery. This beer specifically...
Are they on the La Palma beer tour, Noble Ales? Aren't they in...
They're in Anaheim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
on Sinclair.
That La Palma beer tour that you and I have gone on, where it's got a number of different breweries on there.
Are they? No.
Are they part of that? There was about 10 different... And you've had a couple of those. The Brewery, Brewery X.
Yeah.
What's the other one we liked?
Bottle Logic.
Bottle Logic is on that.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different breweries on that tour. Are they part of that?
I don't know. I don't know exactly where they're located in. They're in Anaheim. Oh, right here. Right. Over on Sinclair.
Okay.
But you're right at 57.
But good, not too far from Disney.
Yeah, not too exactly. It's an 8.7 alcohol by volume Imperial IPA. It's if you guys like IPAs, it's really good. But if you're not the biggest IPA fan, I wouldn't start here. Imperial IPA is very bitter, but very good.
I'm not a huge... I like hazy IPAs. I like to take the bitterness out. But this, to me, was very good and didn't taste very bittery at all. Yeah,
and this brewery's been around for a while. I mean, they got started in 2009 and started brewing in 2011. So they've been around for a bit in Anaheim. And this beer was, very, very good. I'd highly recommend Noble Ale Works. If you guys are in Southern California or Anaheim area, definitely check them out. The hops in here are Cashmere, Enigma, and Mosaic hops.
And there's 2 great Cobra scenes in this movie, right?
Yes.
One with Indiana Jones and one with Marion, where the Cobra, what is it, when it does that? Where
so he
gets its...
When Indy falls into the pit, he lands and looks up and there's a Cobra right in his face. Yeah, and then she has, I think, maybe in the same area.
Same kind of situation, right?
Yeah, that's part of the reason why I picked it, because snakes and the whole Cobra scenes that we get in this one.
Makes sense.
So, very good. I'd highly recommend Noble Ale Works. Like I said, we've done it before. If you guys want to hear more about some of their other beers in the Shrek 3 episode, we do one of theirs again. So, definitely check them out if you can. Fantastic beer for a fantastic movie. So,
And I would challenge all the other guest hosts because you guys haven't stepped up yet. Grayson, Dominic, Adam, Chris, all you guys, to dress like the character. Tell me, method acting, something to believe in.
I will make sure that everyone from now on dresses up like the characters in the movies they're going into.
Adam as Batman would have been fantastic.
It would have been great. I want to do Spider-Man, and I do have a full Spider-Man thing going on that I could do. I have the mask and everything, so maybe we'll get into that.
There you go.
But I think that about wraps up our Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark episode. So thank you guys so much for listening. We're on Twitter, Instagram. Don't forget to watch on YouTube if you want, or listen anywhere you get podcasts. New episodes every Monday morning at 7 a.m. Dad, thanks for being here this week.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see you next week and a couple weeks after that. This is going to be your first time doing recurrent back-to-back episodes.
First time. I've only done Ant-Man. I'm known for my Ant-Man episodes, but Indiana Jones, as you could tell, I couldn't pass that one up.
I'm excited to have you on. I'm excited to talk about the next 2. We'll see where 4 goes. But, thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you guys next week. Bye.